thank our witness. Mr. Horowitz, you had a very distinguished career as a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, so I will see if you can help me work my way through a quote. And it's not a quote from you, so it may be problematic for you to help work our way through it. The quote is, federal prosecutors will have to close cases and let those criminals go. That is a quote from the President of the United States with respect to sequestration. And I'm wondering who he is talking about, those criminals, because if it's an open case in a U.S. Attorney's Office, we typically refer to those folks as defendants as opposed to criminals, don't we?
That's correct. If it's a charge case, they're a defendant.
So who are those criminals that the President was referring to when he was invoking the Hale-Bopp comet apocalypse talking about sequestration? Do you have any idea who those criminals would be?
I don't, Congressman.
I think your former colleague from the Department of Justice testified that if sequestration were to go into effect, it would take us back to 2009 funding levels. Did I hear the testimony correctly? Yes, sir. How many criminals were let go in 2009?
I'm not aware of criminals being let go. I wasn't in the Justice Department at the time.
How about the gentleman from the Department of Justice? Any criminals let go in 2009?
That's not something I can answer this morning, sir.
Well, I think we would have heard about it if a bunch of criminals were let go due to a lack of funding, don't you? I mean, we would need a congressional hearing for that. We would have all heard about that.
The resources that are provided to the United States Attorney's Organization influences the staffing and the prosecutors and the paralegals we have.
Well, I know that, actually, and we had furloughs in South Carolina. We had to furlough prosecutors. We had to furlough victim advocates. We had to furlough administrative assistants, investigators. Not a single solitary criminal case was closed because of those furloughs. So what I'm trying to get at is the irresponsibility of threatening, whether it's the Attorney General saying we're going to be less safe or the President saying we're going to let those criminals go because we can't survive on 2009 funding levels. So when sequester went into effect, the net result, the net impact on DOJ's budget was what, about $100 million?
The net impact of sequestration? It was $1.6 billion this year.
No, I'm talking about salaries and expenses. The salaries and expenses, because that's what would impact whether or not cases had to be closed and criminals let go, is about $100 million.
I would have different numbers than that. I'm not sure.
Well, let's assume for the sake of argument that I'm right. Just assume arguendo I'm right. Are you telling me there's no other place to save $100 million within DOJ's budget?
Our problem is we have to save $1.6 billion, and that will be comprised of both.
I want to focus on the U.S. Attorney's Office, that line item, salaries and expenses, because the quote was cases are going to be dropped and criminals are going to be let go.
From a chief financial officer perspective, this is the way I would look at the issue that you're raising this morning. When we take the sequestration cut to the U.S. Attorney's Organization, you're right, they have the ability, and frankly, they're going to have to look at taking cuts across the spectrum of their budget. That includes their personnel, their salaries, and their benefits.
What is a SALSA? What is a Special Assistant U.S. Attorney?
What's a Special Assistant Attorney?
Yeah.
That's an ordinary prosecutor is known as an assistant United States
Right,
attorney.
and a special would be a state prosecutor that maybe was on loan, or in some instances, some folks just volunteer to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the experience, and they do so for free. Agreed?
Right. You can have a special AUSA.
Okay, and they would be free in some instances.
They could be.
All right, how much did you spend on conferences last year?
How much did we spend on conferences last year? About $54 million, approximately.
And how many of those conferences were for CLE credit that could not be gathered any other way than attending a conference?
I don't have that information at the table with me. We'd have to get back to you.
Can you get CLE credit so you can keep your law license via the internet?
That I don't know.
Well, you can.
Yeah.
So.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia, the chairman